Chapter 30. Making sure her hood was adequately covering her face, Kessa slipped into Sheila's tent. The girl was sitting on her bed, her body rigid. She jerked awkwardly as Kessa entered. Sheila's body language alerted Kessa that they were not alone, and whoever was there frightened Sheila. It was as Kessa had both feared and hoped. Sykes was there. Feigning ignorance, Kessa began speaking to Sheila. "We don't have much time. If you want your brother to live, you must tell me where he is." Sheila's expression changed from tense to hopeful to alarm in a matter of seconds. Her eyes had slid over to the corner of the tent where a wooden partition stood. So, that was where Sykes was hiding. Kessa wasn't surprised. Sheila's tent didn't provide many concealment spots. Kessa dodged the tiny throwing stars flying in her direction. She avoided the one aimed at her head and felt a sharp jab in her side. Glancing down, she saw the shiny star, its points embedded in her skin. Ripping it free, she tossed it back at the figure leaping toward her. Sykes sidestepped it easily, seized her hood, ripped it off, and whirled her into a chokehold. Kessa blocked access to her neck, then bit his wrist. She repeatedly elbowed him in the ribs until he released her. Sykes pulled back, nursing his wrist. "You little terror," he sneered. "After your mudslinging antics today, I figured it was you, Candy Cane," he said scathingly. "He's going to shred you to pieces when I tell him it was you that spoiled my plans." Despite the ache in her side, Kessa smiled inwardly. The fool had just confirmed her hopes. He hadn't told Cassius anything yet. No report probably meant that the king didn't even know about the poisoned goblet or Sheila. She was tempted to cross her fingers in hopes this was indeed the case, but was too preoccupied with Sykes' onslaught. He fought well. She was bruised and battered by the time she managed to jump on his back and wrap her arms around his neck and her legs around his waist. She applied a chokehold, messy, but she'd keep trying. He clawed at her arms unsuccessfully, then dug his knuckles into the soft tissue just above her knee joint. It hurt enough to loosen her leg grip. He was turning red. Pretty soon her chokehold would knock him out. Aware of this, he rotated his body and fell onto her. Kessa braced herself for contact with the ground. It still knocked the wind out of her. Sykes escaped her hold, climbed up, and started to strangle her. She tried to stab his eyes with her fingers, but her arms weren't long enough. He laughed, easily evading each of her attacks. Kessa heard a loud crash. Glass shards scattered around her. Sykes collapsed on top of her. Confusion set in for a few seconds, until she noted Sheila standing above them, grasping the handle of a broken clay jug. "Will you help my brother?" Sheila asked as Kessa pushed the unconscious man off her. "That's the plan," Kessa said, wincing as she stood up. Her neck was bruised, and the wound in her side was smarting, blood soaking the surrounding area. Peeling her clothing away, she assessed the gash. Tisking her stupidity for getting hit, she evaluated the wound as superficial. Placing a hand against it, she looked around the tent for something to wrap around it. Seeing a long, colorful shawl hanging on the partition, she yanked it down. Sheila groaned. "You have anything else I can use?" Kessa asked, exasperated. When Sheila shook her head, Kessa tied the shawl around her wound and yanked it tight. Peering down at Sykes, Kessa checked to see if he was still breathing. Confirming he was, she noted the swelling where Sheila had struck him with the jug. It was a solid smack that even his thick mat of black hair couldn't conceal. "Who are you, really?" Sheila asked tentatively. She'd heard Sykes call her Candy Cane, but clearly she wasn't just a mud wrestler. Sweeping a bloodied hand through her hair, she glanced at the blue-haired beauty, ignoring her question and asking one of her own. "Where's your brother?" He's in jail. Tell me about the jail. Entrances, exits. How large is the building? What's security like? Everything you can think of. Sheila thought for a moment, and Kessa wondered if the girl was trying to anticipate her plan or formulate one of her own. Sheila, we don't have a lot of time, she said moderately. Pursing her lips and nodding her understanding, Sheila told Kessa that Fervor had a police force in lieu of city guards, and then filled her in on everything she knew about Fervor City Jail. Kessa's brow rose as she realized her plan wasn't going to be as arduous as she'd first estimated. It appeared that crime was almost unheard of in Fervor, a fact that was illustrated by their small police force and how susceptible their 3 jail cells were. According to Sheila, there were only 3 officers on duty at any given hour, one of which was assigned to guard prisoners, if there were any. The prisoners were kept in the lower level of the building, adjacent to the city morgue that was located at the back of the building, which got about as much use as the jail cells. Not a lot. The population in Fervor was young, and Renonian families kept their dead in their homes until burial. Kessa would have done a dance for joy when she heard these details, if she weren't so sore. Rubbing her hands together as she schemed, Kessa said, I brought a handcart. It's just outside. Could you bring it in, please? Once the cart was in the tent, Kessa removed the ropes and gag from inside and gestured to Sykes. I'm going to need some help. Even with Sheila's help, hoisting a man as stocky as Sykes into the cart wasn't easy. Hog-tying him wasn't either, but they managed. Checking the security of the gag one last time, Kessa covered the cart with a taut sheet, pulled her hood back on, and asked Sheila to lead her to the jail. By the way, Kessa, ignoring the twinge of her wound, pulled the handcart as she followed Sheila along the streets of Fervor. Why is your brother in jail? It had occurred to her that she might not want to liberate Sheila's brother. Not if he was guilty of a crime horrible enough to get him locked up in a city where there were only 3 jail cells. Officers found a regalia in his room. A what? Kessa had no idea what a regalia was, but if simply possessing it was bad enough to get you arrested, it was probably a deadly drug, toxin, or a dangerous animal. A regalia, Sheila behaved shocked by her companion's ignorance, is a rare flower that only grows in Fire Frog Swamp. They bloom once every 5 years. Endangered fire frogs eat the shriveled regalia blossom. Some believe the regalia fuels the fire they breathe. Picking or even touching a regalia is forbidden. Renonians were fierce environmentalists. Kessa remembered that much from her lessons. What is the sentence for picking one? 15 years. Yikes. Yes, my brother knew better. Although Sheila had left her statement hanging, it wasn't difficult for Kessa to unravel the rest. Let me guess. About a week after you'd accepted the role of serving the royal dais, an anonymous tip led authorities to your brother's room where they found a regalia that your brother swore he had no knowledge of. How did you know? It's a common script for Sykes and his ilk. Kessa clammed up, despite her companion's subsequent inquiries. They arrived at the jail an hour or so pre-dusk. The building wasn't very large or elaborate. It didn't stand out like the rest of the city, even with its assortment of colored bricks and its tinted center window. A double iron bar gate at the jail's entrance was the most oppressive thing about the structure. Kessa wasn't concerned with the main entrance, though. After peeking under the sheet to see if their prisoner was still unconscious, Kessa adjusted her hood and glanced at Sheila. Stay here. I'm going to have a gander. Reconnaissance complete and yielding hopeful results, Kessa returned to Sheila. Do you know any of the officers on duty tonight? Not likely, Sheila confessed sadly. I haven't been able to bring myself to visit my brother here very often. Reaching into the cart, Kessa pulled out a large jug of Renonian spirits. Passing it to the girl, she asked, Do you think you can get all 3 officers together and distract them for a while? Concoct some sort of story for your presence with ale? Sheila gave Kessa a smug expression before sweeping her hair forward, batting her lashes, and displaying a sultry smile. The effect was dazzling. Kessa smirked. Guess that's a yes. Dragging the handcart behind her, Kessa descended a narrow, neglected dirt path to the lower-level morgue entrance in the back of the building. The secluded entrance was at the bottom of a dip in the road, which continued for a couple meters and ended at a wooded area. The padlock was laughable for the spy, who picked it in a matter of seconds. Quietly swinging the door open, she froze. Lying there, dozing lazily, were 2 massive dogs, roughly the size of young black bears. One of them opened an eyelid, while the other lifted its head. Guard dogs. Sheila had neglected to mention that. Closing the door again, the spy leaned against it, speculating how she was going to get past 2 colossal dogs. A glance down the road answered her question. Reflecting upon her unprecedented luck, she almost cackled. A hop, skip, and a jump up the street was a butcher's shop, its open sign hanging beneath the colorful awning that sheltered the street-facing service counter. Lucky, the butcher said in greeting, wiping his hands down his pink apron. Just about to close for the evening. Yes, very lucky, Kessa agreed, keeping her hood low. Vivid green eyes peered out at her from beneath bushy brown brows. He bowed forward, supporting himself with 2 hands on the counter. What you want, lassie? You have any cow tongues? Taken aback, the butcher straightened his posture, repeating, Cow tongues? Those bushy brows inclined and his voice deepened as he asked, What you be wanting those for at this hour? Naturally, the butcher wasn't accustomed to hooded customers arriving ere closing and ordering cow tongues. Shrugging a shoulder casually, Kessa explained, Forgot to feed the dogs. They aren't too happy with me. Won't even let me in the door. She chuckled. Ah, I get you. The butcher grinned. Got me a couple dogs myself. They love cow tongue. Suspicion allayed, he went into the back while Kessa appreciated the fact that she'd been raised around dogs. Both the Decoras and the Aegeons had loved dogs, and had passed this love on to their respective offspring. Slamming 4 cow tongues on the counter, the butcher briskly roused Kessa from her memories. He wrapped them up post-haste and handed them to her. If those buttes don't satisfy him, I don't know what will, he said loftily. His green eyes lit up as Kessa tossed him a gold coin, a substantial tip. Thank you, lassie. You have a good evening now. You as well. A satisfied grin on her face, Kessa pulled the cart into the morgue, past the dogs, who were happily devouring the tongues. She considered it a miracle Sykes hadn't come to yet after all the jostling. As if summoned by her disbelief, Sykes grunted, his eyes beginning to blink. Ah, you're awake. Good, Kessa said. Wouldn't want you to miss this. The door joining the morgue to the jail wasn't locked. Ensuring that the jail guard was absent, she slipped through the door, yanking the cart with the struggling Sykes in after her. 2 of the cells were empty, their doors ajar. Sheila's brother was sitting cross-legged in the center of his cell facing the window. A long chain snaking from its attachment to the eastern wall of the cell was probably secured to his ankle. The chain was an understandable precaution, since the window wasn't barred. Kessa envied a town that could be so casual with their prisoners. Sykes' commotion in the cart alerted Sheila's brother to visitors. Standing up, he moved over to the bars, the chain dragging along the dirty floor behind him. Regardless of the poor lighting, his electric blue eyes pierced Kessa's defenses. Sheila's brother was every bit as good-looking as his sister. The spy had expected him to be attractive, but she'd underestimated the power of his magnetism. Grasping the bars, he peered out at her, the cart, and Sykes, who'd stopped struggling. "Are you the man Sheila told me about?" The spell broke, and despite knowing her identity was concealed by her hooded cape, she recoiled at being referred to as a man. "No, that's him." She jabbed a thumb at Sykes. "What's going on?" Sheila's brother asked guardedly. "A swap," she replied, retrieving her lockpicks. "I don't understand. Who are you?" Kessa grimaced, inwardly chastising herself for forgetting to ask Sheila her brother's name. Knowing his name would have added to her credibility. The lock gave way to her expertise, and she swung the cell door open. Its rusty hinges complained. She hoped not loud enough to be noticed upstairs. "I'm here to rescue you and Sheila. This man, Sykes, set you up so he could use your sister. His promises are empty. I'm here to save you from a sealed fate. Please." She hoped he'd fill in his name. "Tarnik?" "Tarnik," she said his name with a slight thrill, both because it gave her pleasure to say his name and because his giving his name demonstrated trust. "Please trust me." "I don't see it as I have any other choice," he said, watching as Kessa pulled the cart into the cell, dumping Sykes onto the floor like a sack of potatoes. Sykes' renewed struggling efforts were ignored as Kessa bent down to pick the lock on Tarnik's ankle manacle, which proved to be the toughest lock yet. Tarnik gratefully rubbed his ankle the moment it was freed from the fetter. Kessa attached the chain to Sykes' ankle. Stepping back, she clasped her chin thoughtfully. "No, it won't do. Heads up, Sykes." With that, she whacked him across the back of the head with the handle of her dagger. Once he was unconscious again, Kessa retied him so that he was locked sitting crisscross, much the same position Tarnik had been in when she arrived. She rewrapped Sykes' cloak around him so that the ropes and the back of the gag weren't visible. While she hadn't expected to be attracted to Sheila's brother, she had anticipated his blue hair. Digging in her pocket, she withdrew the blue eyeshadow powder she'd borrowed from Charlo. Blowing the indigo powder on Sykes' hair gave it a cerulean tint, much like Tarnik's. "Don't know if they'll notice in the dark," she explained, "but just in case." Giving the jail cell the once over, she motioned for Tarnik to jump into the cart and then covered him with the sheet. Satisfied with the scene, she pulled the cart out of the cell, swung the door closed, relocked it, and left the jail. Tossing the last 2 cow tongues to the dogs, Kessa exited the morgue. It was twilight by the time she'd made her way to the designated meeting site. Since she'd need a spot that was both secluded and easily located for her and Sheila, Kessa had indicated where she'd first seen Sheila meet with Sykes. Sheila was not there yet, and after several moments the spy worried that something had gone awry. Just as she'd started to consider going back for Sheila, she heard approaching footsteps. Sheila appeared. The moment she saw Tarnik standing casually beside the cart, she threw her arms around him and expressed her gratitude that he was safe, sound, and with her. "Where is Sykes?" Sheila asked after the tearful reunion. "He took your brother's place." Sheila's mouth dropped open, and her overjoyed demeanor switched to one of uncertainty and fear. Anticipating her reaction, Kessa explained, "Sykes isn't the sort to leave witnesses. Whether or not you succeeded in poisoning the yellow-haired dignitary, Sheila, You and your brother were marked for death tonight. Sykes was in your tent to kill you, and he most likely paid assassins, or maybe even officers, to visit Tarnick's cell later and kill him. Sykes will be the victim of his own treacherous cruelty. Taking a few moments to digest Kessa's revelation, Sheila covered her face with both hands. Tarnick recoiled, bowing his head. Several moments had passed before he turned to his sister, disbelief and horror illustrated on his handsome face. You were going to poison some yellow-haired person? The accusation slammed into Sheila much harder than any physical blow. Tears rolling down her face, she cried, I didn't know what else to do. You were in jail, falsely accused. I couldn't bear it. So you conspired to assassinate someone? Tarnick's voice was tempered with a mixture of disgust and rage. Did you succeed? No. Candy Cane stopped it. She gestured at the hooded spy. I'm so sorry, Tar. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was all alone and so worried about you. Murder, Sheila. You resorted to murder. It's inexcusable. Feeling bad for the girl, Kessa interceded. Manipulation is Sykes' specialty, Tarnick. Don't be too hard on your sister. She was no match for his skills. She rationalized. He'd easily convince her of your grave peril and that her complicity in the assassination was minimal. I'm betting you have no family or close friends nearby. Am I right? The pair shook their heads miserably. It's just the two of us, Tarnick stated. Kessa frowned as she continued. He chose you because you're isolated and vulnerable, fewer people to miss you. It wasn't a coincidence that Sheila got asked to serve the royal dais, any more than it was a coincidence that you got arrested for a crime you didn't commit, Tarnick. Sykes had this planned from the outset. Tarnick muttered something under his breath. I should also point out that Sykes would have killed you both whether or not your sister agreed to his plan. Sooner if she hadn't. So, technically, Sheila saved your lives by accepting. Tarnick's electric blue eyes focused on Kessa with such intensity that she felt seared for having the audacity to defend Sheila's actions. No, you saved our lives, Tarnick corrected. I don't even know your real name. But not only did you prevent my sister from becoming an assassin, you risked your own life and saved 3. Thank you. Despite herself, Kessa couldn't resist puffing up a little at his praise. The searing feeling replaced with a glowing one. It was telling that Tarnick included the intended victim of the assassination in his count. He was a good man. What if Sykes is recognized or escapes? Sheila asked tentatively, avoiding her brother's gaze. Glowing feeling terminated, Kessa inhaled. This was a circumstance she'd previously considered and hoped didn't occur. I will have to deal with it. We will be there to help you. I will tell the whole story to the authorities, to the king himself if I must, Sheila said with conviction. No, you won't, the spy clipped out, imagining just what Cassius would do to Sheila. The poor girl had no idea that it was the king who'd ordered the hit. You two haven't a clue how much trouble you're in. You must disappear tonight, this instant, actually. You won't be able to say goodbye to your friends or gather any of your belongings. Everything must appear as though Sykes succeeded in... She drew a line across her throat with her index finger, a depiction of death. Believe me, I realize how hard this is going to be, but it can't be helped. His frown deepening, Tarnick asked, Will we ever be able to return? Looking directly into his electric blues, Kessa said, Not while Cassius sits on the throne. While Sheila broke into tears, Tarnik's brain worked. Kessa observed as the young man put 2 and 2 together. Her slight implication that the king was involved hadn't gone unnoticed. Tarnik was as intelligent as he was handsome and honorable. If only. Kessa shook her head, feeling anger broiling her insides. There was no point traveling the if-only path. What was done, but if only Sykes hadn't… Stop! No point wishing these 2 had been spared. They hadn't been. "I'm so sorry," Kessa said. "Unfortunate choices are a catalyst for unfortunate consequences," Tarnik said, casting another glare at his sister, then shifting his gaze downwards. "Unfortunate circumstances are a common catalyst for both," Kessa revised gently. Putting his arm around his sobbing sister, Tarnik bolstered his courage with a deep breath. "We'll be all right, Sheila, I promise." He extended his hand to Kessa for a handshake. "A simple thank you doesn't suffice, I know. But thank you." His brow furrowed as he considered how to refer to her. "Candy cane, was it?" "That'll do." Kessa shook his hand, smiling under the shadow of her hood. "I hope we meet again, Candy Cane," Tarnik said, grasping her hand with a warmth that conveyed the depth of his gratitude far better than his verbal expression. Kessa dug a pouch full of coins out of her cloak with her other hand. Releasing his handshake, she thrust the pouch into his grasp. "This will help with disappearing. I'm truly sorry that any of this happened. Neither of you deserve it." "Misfortune strikes when and whoever it will. But search hard enough and you will find the counteraction. You were the counteraction to our misfortune, Miss Kane. We couldn't possibly take your money. We already can't come close to repaying you." "Take the pouch, Tarnik," Kessa said in a tone that didn't allow dispute. She pushed the pouch back at him, her determination impossible to refute. "Good luck to both of you." His attempt to return the coins failed. Tarnik smiled, nodded compliantly, and pocketed them. Sheila thanked the spy with a heartfelt hug, and after a final farewell, the pair trudged deeper into the forest, their destination unknown. Sighing, Kessa grabbed the cart and tugged forward a little too vehemently for her hitherto ignored wound. Gingerly, she placed a hand over it and felt the dampness of fresh blood. Shaking her head, she moved on, deciding to keep ignoring it just then. The sun was setting, and she had a dinner appointment, for which she was already late. She still had to change. At least one of the 2 hurdles she had to jump over tonight was behind her. Lamentably, the next hurdle, though less dangerous, was far more intimidating, and should she fail to clear it, the fallout catastrophic.